Okay, hello, and welcome to this eSchool News webinar, EdTech Evangelists, Strategic Partnerships, and the Future of Education. My name is Kevin Hogan. I am the Content Director for eSchool News, and I am happy you are joining us today for what I know will be a very insightful and important conversation. The conversation is brought to you by LG. LG for Education envelops technology for the next generation of thinkers, creators, and go-getters. They empower immersive, engaging, and interactive learning experiences because that's how you can ensure a better tomorrow. At LG, they respect the preferences of educators and administrators and their capacity to come up with new ways of doing things and reorganizing the building blocks of a system to better suit their needs. Now, before we get to our conversation, I'd like to take a minute to go over some of the features of the platform that we're using for this webinar. This event is being recorded, so you don't have to worry about missing a thing. Within a few days, you'll receive an email message that contains a link to the recorded webinar, along with a PDF of the slides. Now, if you have a question or comment for us, please use the chat function that you can see at the bottom of the screen. Feel free also to use this feature to contact someone from eSchool if you're having a technical question. But again, if you have any ideas, thoughts, comments about what the panelists are discussing, please include them because it really helps guide the conversation in a way that will help the audience yourselves. So now with these housekeeping items out of the way, let's get started with some introductions. First, Kate Petty. Kate is a trainer for the LG Create Board Teaching and Learning, which is within the LG Business Solutions. Kate went one-to-one in her high school English classes back in 2012 with iPod Touches and never looked back. She has since worked with educators around the world as they discover more about how to make sure students are prepared for the ever-changing world that greets them upon graduation. Kate has a special interest in pedagogy that lends itself to collaboration-based learning and in exploring what education will look like with AI finding a quick and firm place in our lives today. And next, Bryson Bregan. Bryson is a senior account manager of the public sector for LG Business Solutions. Results-oriented and innovative IT sales professional with a background in EdTech, Bryson has demonstrated expertise in leading sales efforts and actively engaging in client interactions, negotiations, and deal closures for over 12 years. So wow, we're back to 2012 was a big year for our panel. Bryce's proficiency in seamless collaboration with customers, their partners, and internal teams highlights his dedication to fulfilling the complete solution. So Kate and Bryson, thanks so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. I have to say, I do a lot of these conversations, but have been looking forward to this one. When you look at the descriptions of the abstract that put together and looking at both your histories, I like to think our readers and our listeners who are not only on this conversation today, but overall, are all EdTech evangelists. That's one of those great phrases from the tech space that goes back to last century, where people were talking about being evangelists and the importance of using technology, especially using technology in school, which is probably one of the sectors that needs evangelists more than many of the others. Kate, when you started back in 2012, you probably had to have some strong arguments, almost in an evangelistic sense, to put computers in the classroom. I mean, that was really a conversation up until the past 5 years that was still kind of happening. Maybe we can start off, talk a little bit about your journey here to where you've gone from those iPad touches to now neck deep into the world of AI and where maybe evangelists are going to be more important than ever.
Yeah, absolutely. So it actually is a little, maybe my journey is a little different than everybody else's, but I didn't ask for them to be in my classroom back then. I was voluntold, and we all showed up for a meeting, for a summer meeting, and we all got told we were putting iPod touches in the classroom. And if you remember back in 2012, the iPod touches weren't very manageable for education, so they were quite a pain But moving forward from there, right, and that really spurred my journey. It made me realize actually that students were uh, just as excited to explore new technology as we were. So, we really helped each other and guided each other through that. And that led me to my TOSA position there in my school district here in Southern California. And then my brief tenure as a district administrator in Southern California too, right after that. But I think what was though I think the biggest there's two big things I see happening in education right now. Well, that has happened, and that was back in 2010 when students started bringing iPhones to the classroom, right? And I still had my flip phone, right? I had my black Nokia flip phone, and the kids started bringing their iPhones, and teachers were so angry that students were cheating using their phones, to find all the answers and things like that. And eventually, we all began to embrace, well, okay, this thing's never ever going to go away. iPhone, this technology, this computer in your pocket is never going away. So now, how do we teach, to that? How do we not teach them how to memorize facts, and now we can dig deeper? And honestly, now we're at this precipice with AI. It's really the same thing. You're hearing the same thing with educators. Their kids are cheating, and yeah, maybe they are. But how do you embrace what they're able to do with AI, and teach now on top of that? And so I think that's where we're at. And AI, that's for students, but you could go on and on with that. But I think I was lucky in that I had a really supportive team in my district, technology team in my district, who just really wanted us all to move forward and embrace this. So it was really really quite cool.
Yeah, and Bryson, from your side of the fence, and you look at schools and you look at districts, how have you seen the role of that EdTech evangelist kind of emerge or evolve over the years? I mean, it's again, the education space is a weird one, right? I mean, there's 15,000 different school districts of various shapes and sizes, school boards who are probably approving budgets or disproving budgets, and just different personalities that each go into those. From the LG side of things, and when you're approaching, you're working with districts to create partnerships. What role do these folks play? And maybe you can kind of break out and give us if there are different flavors of evangelist.
Of course, and just kind of giving a little bit of my experience from where I started was introducing interactive flat panels to the market. So part of that company, part of that team that said, hey, there's this really cool technology here that makes a lot of sense. And at that point in time, the person we were talking with was the director of technology. They had this umbrella where they made all the decisions, all the laptops, Chromebooks just getting started. Great idea to buy iPads. It's really cool. We got a great price on them. We want to go in and be able to say, we are providing technology to our students. And that progression has really changed where it's not so much providing the technology, but how can we make it applicable and our teachers and students successful with that? So especially over the last 5 years, where we've really seen a lot of funding into schools because of COVID, this infrastructure is ready to support that for the long stay. So I would say the EdTech teams are larger, but somehow in a lot of the districts, especially the larger ones that I have, the professional development resources, they have less resources. So how do you go in and scale these to where they're successful? And a lot of that goes into the evaluation process of your vendor, really understanding the scope, but then it's also bringing all these different parties with different objectives, different priorities, different challenges together to create that shared vision.
Yeah, and Kate, there's so many different kind of aspects of technology integration and implementing different schemes. It goes from curriculum software, it goes to, you look at the LG solutions, you talk about devices. Are there differences between the way that an educator who, say, is a sixth grade chemistry teacher who really wants to start to see some interactive displays being put into their classroom, what are the steps that they can take to begin to have that process go forward?
So that's a really interesting question. I think you're talking about from the bottom up, right? To convince their administrators that this is something that they want. And it really is just those pilots, right? It's the, hey, you know what, let me have this in my classroom. Let me try it out. And it's always that I'll try it out and I'll let you know how it goes. That's how we all got technology, and still get technology in our classrooms, right? Is to just convince your administrator that you'll try this, and then you promise that you're going to train the rest of the staff if they move forward. And I think that's what it is going, making a case. It's that creating a persuasive PowerPoint for your administration to say, this is just, you have a little bit of a budget left over this year. Can I put can I put this technology in my classroom, whether it's, interactive display boards or whatever they're looking for, and then, moving forward with that and just being the volunteer to move that forward. And it has to come from, it's so interesting. Bryson was reminding me of something when he was talking, and right before COVID, I do know that a lot of school districts, at least here in California, I don't know about nationwide, started getting, sending their TOSAs and sending their academic coaches back to the classroom, because they felt like technology, everyone knew it, we're good, we don't need it anymore, everyone's using it, we're fine. And then COVID hit, right? And suddenly everyone had to learn how to teach online and teach hybrid. And it's been this really interesting roller coaster. I don't know, Bryson, if you found that as well, where, they started ramping down at COVID, but then suddenly back up again. And is it coming back down again or going back up? I don't know on my end. I think it's from what I know from my old school district, they got sent back to the classroom last year, and now they're back again at the district office because the district just can't not have them in the, the coaches and the TOSAs in the schools.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say a lot of those resources are being centralized at the district office. What I've seen specifically was, like you said, it was a ramp up with COVID. Then we kind of went to the other end of the spectrum where there was a lot of unknowns, in terms of funding, in terms of schools, attendance, what does that next step look like? And this year, especially over like the last 2 months of back to school, I feel like this is the first time it feels normal. We're going back to school, it feels normal. We don't have a lot of those pressures on us in the past where we're worrying about credit loss and all these different priorities. And for the first time in a while, we don't have even funding for a lot of evaluation for a lot of these districts. So it's just back to teaching, it's some stability. And that's where I really see, school district teachers thrive, being able to just provide that consistent experience. And then once you have that consistency, you can build on top of that. So it's a pretty exciting time right now.
That is nice too, because the teachers, when things are normal and they can just take a breath, that's when they're excited to try new things, right? You can't do that. It's kind of like that Maslow's pyramid. You can't do that when you're just trying to survive in your classroom or even at home. But once you're able to take a breath, you can start thinking and teaching on top of other things. So that is a really exciting time that I'm going to knock on wood when you said things are getting back to normal, that something doesn't happen, but I agree with that for sure.
Yeah, new normal, right?
Yeah, whatever that new normal means. Yeah, exactly. Now, have either of you seen any innovation spring from this kind of age of the pandemic, and this forced beta test for the use of these technologies? I don't know, things like virtual field trips, or even just the use of your systems to have virtual parent-teacher conferences. I mean, there do seem to be some behaviors that have changed, certainly amongst the students. The students just think, you talk about the new normal, that's just normal for them, right? But there's been a lot of behavioral changes when it comes to faculty, where, I don't know, if I interviewed a teacher 6 years ago about the fact that their class was being recorded and maybe even assessed and put on, they'd be like, no way. Or depending on what state you're in, the state union representative would be like, no way. Now here we are in October 2024. People kind of shrug their hands and shrug their shoulders about the use of those cameras, right? Talk a little bit about how that's kind of changed the dynamics when it comes to the use of your systems.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I taught 1984 for, to my seniors, and every year it got less and less scary, right? And I think that once you're a teacher and especially during COVID, you ended up having to quarantine for some reason at home and teaching from home to your class. Things change, your priorities change. And again, it's that survival, like you just do what you need to do. I need to get to my students. I need to serve my students. So I think it'll be a very AI. So that's what's scary about AI, right? Because what AI is essentially doing is it's saying, in order to use me, I have to hear what is going on in your classroom, and you have to be able to command things, or to ask for things, or I have to be able to understand what's happening in the environment to be able to serve you. And so it's not even the cameras anymore, right? We're all used to the cameras. It's more the what will be really interesting for me is the type of data collection possibly with AI, but also they're just listening in. It's not my administrator listening in. It's a whole other entity that's listening into my conversation in order to help me get things, to serve me. Have you heard a lot about that, Bryson, with security issues in AI?
Well, one of the things that I've definitely been hearing has been intellectual property. So who owns it after that's been recorded? So that's been something that's always been important, is student and teacher data privacy. And especially with the high-end cyber attacks over the last few years, what does that look like? You mentioned when those iPads rolled out in 2012, that it was first time, no way to management, it's brand new experience. And like you said, we're in that same place with AI, where great tools, so many resources, so much potential, but we still need to find a way that's going to be like standardized, packaged, managed, that will work for many different school districts of different sizes. So still a lot of learning curves, but it's going to happen. There's no going back.
Yeah. I think especially as teachers, like what are you willing to say okay to in order for something to grade your papers for you? And then, to handle the grammar aspects of the paper so you can dig in deep with the content, and so what is the trade-off, maybe, is what it's going to be too, right? It's unfathomable to even imagine. Kevin, have you heard much about that on your end as well?
Yeah, well, it's certainly, I think the burden, when we go back to talk about the evangelists, the burden is always on them to be the voice of reason, I think, because there's always this evolution of technology and this next great thing that's coming in, and then there's a fear cycle, and then there's a cycle of hype to where now this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, and then there's ultimately this realization that there's somewhere in between, which is what the reality is, which is kind of boring, but which is actually good at the same time. I mean, it comes with, it happened with the internet, it happened with the advance of mobile devices in the classroom. And now it seems more than ever, obviously with AI, because there are so many different layers to how you talk about it and how it's involved, right? I mean, you folks just went through 3 or 4 of them. There's 12 more that you kind of need to kind of wrestle with in terms of getting together. The fear cycle for AI was, it's going to take all the teacher jobs. Like, no, it's not, right? It's obvious that it's not. But now it's going to solve everything. It's just not going to solve everything either. But it's now that it starts to become baked into the tools that the teachers are using day to day, and it becomes boring. And you say about asking AI to grade papers, or maybe you ask AI to put together a 25-word multiple choice test on sharks for 6th graders. And when that teacher sees that they can do that in a fraction of the time it used to do it, then maybe it's all not so bad, right?
Yeah, it's bringing them up too, right? I think if anything, that's the hard part for teachers, right? Is we want to make sure we're serving our students, but we don't have enough hours in the day to do it, and so if anything that I think can be done to ease teachers and free them up a little bit in the afternoons or the evenings to spend time with their families, or or walk their dogs, get home in time to walk their dog in the evening, right? Is, I think, going to be beneficial overall, hopefully, soon.
Yeah, and one of the other pieces of technology evolution. I'm dating myself here, I guess, when I talk about this, but the greatest things I say since white bread, the greatest things since whiteboards would be interactive displays and the changes that went on there. When you're talking about doing major installs in the districts, Bryson, maybe you can talk a little bit there about how behaviors changed when that took place, and does that mimic some of the things that you're seeing happen now?
In terms of behavior change and rolling AI out at the district level?
Well, just in terms of using your technologies within the classroom, and how people might have been using whiteboards for years, have their curriculum set up on them, and now they've been introduced with a new technology, and how does that affect their work, and then how does LG work with those folks to make those things happen?
Absolutely, and I'll probably bring that back a little bit. You mentioned about innovation, so we've been having a lot of the new technology, innovation, AI, plus for research. So how do you go and evaluate that program? I think the easiest way starts with you, the EdTech Evangelist, is to really determine what that why is and have that vision. And when you're talking to your director of technology, being able to provide use cases, quantifiable data to them is the easiest way to go in and get their support. Because once you have their support, they will go in and they will make your life a lot easier by getting support from your even higher level for the even higher level them, your executive level support. They will go in and clear a lot of the roadblocks if it makes sense for them. So in terms of how do I make this successful, it really goes back to people management. That was something that they really focused and on in my master's class for informational technology. And it's more about the people management than it is about the technology itself. So being able to say, hey, this is what good looks like. This is a district that has been really successful with it, and I'd like to try it here. And that's really how you get their buy-in from the very beginning. And they're in these conferences, these networking events every single year, and they're getting the latest information. So collaborating with them and having a vision and having referenceable information, it goes a long way.
So, Kate, a couple phrases, a couple cliches keep popping into my head as we have this conversation. One is practice what you preach. In terms of, and you mentioned it before, is like becoming your own guinea pig to be that pilot program that you can then prove to your tech directors or to your school board or to the wider community of what you're doing is correct, which is also another cliche, which is asking forgiveness instead of permission, which can be a little bit more difficult within the confines of school district policies and politics, right? What sort of advice do you have for educators to be able to do both of those things and keep their job at the same time?
Oh my goodness. Well, it's about closing your door, right? That's what I did. When I started using the one-to-ones and using Google before Google was an education thing, right? Back in, my first Google account, I think, was in 2006. And the librarian brought it to us in some random thing. But it's really about, and then you start doing these new things in the classroom, and even your colleagues are looking at you like you're cheating, like you're not serving your students. And at some point you close your door, right? And because you know what you're doing is working and you know what you're doing is effective. And then you give it a year. And then when they see that the students had a really good time, then I think that's what I did, is I brought then my colleagues in, and I'm like, okay, you guys, hey, I know that you're not thrilled with what you saw, but let me kind of explain this to you, and let's do some projects together. and bringing those colleagues in. But knowing all the while, I mean, it's an old acronym, but it's still so relevant, SAMR, right? Knowing that the teachers are going to go, even now, the teachers are with interactive display boards, the teachers are going to go through the same cycle. They're going to use it as substitution, and they're going to move up the SAMR scale. I'm not sure where redefinition might come with IDBs, but it is that just recognizing that you had a whole year to play with it, and now you've got to help them to move through that scale. And if you're moving through that scale, I feel like it's going to go well. Your expectations are set where they're supposed to be, but it's closing that door as you're testing and moving through it, unless your colleagues are super cool about it, and then keep the door open. But also recognizing that most likely you're not going to get fired for trying something new. So close the door and just try the new things and see what happens, and have fun with it. Know that you're going to fail. There was like a couple times that I tried something with my first period class, right? It's always first period, and it bombed, and I just looked at him. I'm like, you guys, let's just stop. this isn't working. And they were so appreciative that I was willing to just call the failure where it was, and try something different the next day. So but then by period 7 I'd worked it out, and things worked beautifully. So you just never know. But yeah, close your door at the beginning, and introduce. You remember that your colleagues are coming in on the SAMR scale after that. Yeah.
Does that resonate with you, Bryson, in your experiences where you see schools and districts?
Absolutely. And kind of building on top of that, one of the things that I'm hearing very consistently, especially over like the last year, is ecosystems. So when you're in the past, that ecosystem used to be, one software, one curriculum. And now with so many different options, what does that ecosystem look like? It's a little bit of everything. There are a lot of companies out right now that are bringing all of these under one umbrella, like Google. There's a lot of power in having the same platform as a teacher and a student. There's a lot of collaboration, and most importantly, you reduce that learning curve. So in 10 years, Google Chrome OS is going to be very similar as it is today, when you don't have that type of consistency with other vendors, depending on their size and their stability. So anything that you can do to reduce that learning curve is worth considering, and definitely where you want to go in and put your time on the front end, especially when you're talking about those larger districts where you don't have, where you have one EdTech coach to 20 schools. Mm-hmm. So it gets a lot harder to manage.
Right.
Well, that's true too for devices, right? And just the whole infrastructure. So school districts that have a lot of schools, being able to kind of create that ecosystem at the district level too, with IT, and not have to go to 10 different places to troubleshoot one thing, because they've piecemealed everything together, and having those full ecosystems under one roof or one umbrella, where they just have one support person they need to go to if a switch isn't flipped. Have you seen that too, Bryson?
Absolutely. And I think we have to be very thankful for some of the benefits that we did for COVID and funding, and removing a lot of those infrastructure blocks that probably wouldn't have been addressed if it didn't happen.
Yeah, very true. I mean, there are silver linings, right, that have come out of the chaos of the past several years, including behaviors and including ideas of culture, as we mentioned before, where there was sometimes a culture of resistance of the use of technology, and I think that's pretty much evaporated, as far as I can tell. That people understand the power of the technology and how it affects students, especially kind of going forward. Talk a little bit about some of the district cultures that you see, Bryson, in your work. I mean, are there any particular distinctions when it comes to the style of those evangelists? Any kind of success stories you can point to of where someone has kind of gone from being that guinea pig or in that one classroom to where it is scaled to where it's kind of a school or district solution?
Absolutely. And I've seen the story quite a few times, and a lot of my experience has been meeting these teachers at conferences. So these EdTech conferences where you go and you learn about the newest technology. I've seen a lot of very successful cases where they go and they take that technology back and they have a platform to share it. Now, you have districts where they won't send you on these conferences. So how are you successful doing that? And there are still a lot of free resources out there. We're actually hosting one, do a little plug later this month where we're inviting a lot of educators to come, share their best practices, share what they're using in the classroom, network with other like-minded people. So kind of backing up, a lot of the success is on you, but it's also the environment that you're working in. I've seen districts where they are very open technology. When they go about making decisions, it's a very formula. It's a formula. It's a formula that they've done for the last 20 years on how they evaluate technology, and it's still relevant today because, again, it's the people management. The technology might change, but the one thing that's constant is change. There's always going to be change. And then I've also worked with districts where it's hard for me providing support to a school. They're blocking my emails. So a lot of that is setting realistic goals within the ecosystem or within the district that you're working with. So starting out small, building that relationship with wins, and just try to keep getting those wins and helping your technology leaders kind of open up and like, hey, your life is actually easier when we can solve these problems at a district level. It's not so much what's important. You have to explain to them why that's important to the students. Why is that important to your fellow colleagues? Hey, if you open up this port, then you're going to get a lot less customer service calls and tickets. And that type of message is going to resonate with them.
Yeah, it sounds to me what Bryce is saying, Kate, is that we need to expand the definition of evangelist to maybe include diplomat as a title, right?
Always, right? There's always got to be, even today, between IT and instruction, there's got to be a liaison between the two because, even just a few years ago at my last district, there was an IT person who was in charge of how it's more technical. I'm sure you all know what it is, but how much bandwidth to give each kind of website, and they shrunk YouTube. They shrunk YouTube like to very little of the bandwidth, and not having a teacher finally say, or a liaison say, you can't shrink YouTube. Just having those conversations and making sure that those executive meetings have representation so that IT and instruction somebody understands both and can communicate that to them is key for sure. Yeah.
What about the students themselves? Talk a little bit about student agency now post-COVID and what part they play in terms of the use of AI and other technologies. And again, I mean, they're probably using it before the teachers even realized they were using it, right? I mean, there's a difference there between now and this generation of student versus say 5 or 6 years ago, right?
There's also a big difference between the student today and the student 2 years ago. So I did go back to the classroom right after COVID and spent a year in the classroom right after COVID. So it had been about 10 years since I had been in the classroom, and just and I'm sure a lot of teachers feel this way, but just the way that the students, they couldn't stay on one tab. So you wanted the device in front of them, but there were 10 tabs open and they were shopping, and it wasn't a classroom management thing. I mean, obviously it was a classroom management thing, but it wasn't, it is about how to engage students now with this, with them having 10 tabs open and understanding, they're listening to you. It's kind of like studying. I don't understand how kids can study with headphones on, right? and my daughter does it just fine. And now they can hear you, but they've got 10 tabs open and they're shopping. So is that a problem? Am I needing to engage them in a different way? Is AI going to be able, they could just set their AI pilot to listen to the whole lecture and then they can have the summary at the end of it. So it's what is that going to look like? And it is different now. So students have stopped. I really think, most students don't have the 10 tabs open anymore. They're understanding, or is it them understanding they need to be on the right tab, or teachers learning how to teach and get them on the right tab? And it's probably a little bit of both, but it was a beast after COVID and trying to, there was never a point where it was going to go back to the old classroom ways. And I don't know that any teacher, I've never met a teacher yet that says that their classroom is exactly the same way as it was before COVID.
And that kind of reintroduces the fear cycle, I think, a little bit when it comes to this. Especially, we cover the higher ed space as well, and there's this whole TikTok trend now of college students recording their professors freaking out as they watch the students open up their laptop in live feed, record the lecture, and have the notes summaries come out as the professor's done. It's changing the dynamics completely. So there is a shock and awe to that is kind of taking over.
And it's crazy. It's crazy accurate. Like we have,
right.
Bryson and I have been on calls where there's been the AI pilot in there, and then they'll get the email summary at the end. And yep, I mean, like exactly. They even the AI even pinpointed who had which action items without us actually listing them. So it's insane what even just little bit the AI pilots will do at this point.
And so when the rest of the faculty group kind of all turn their heads to look at that evangelist for the answers to this, any advice for them in terms of on how to manage this disruption?
Is it a disruption? Yeah, it is, right? In that sense, but it's that thing. It's not going away. The same thing I had to tell the teachers when the internet came into their class. The phones came in their classrooms. This isn't going away. So now that your students can, you can record. The teacher can record the lecture and send the summary out to the kids, right? And or the teacher can take a look at what is the AI pinpointing as the main points, and is it accurate, and how do I need to change my lecture so that it is accurate for my students? At this point in time, AI still can't provide those images and that real world experience, and we all know learners learn differently. So AI is great for our readers, right, or maybe even our auditory, but some of our visual learners still needed to be in that classroom to see the images. My daughter's in she was looking at nano engineering, and I had no idea what that was, but those images that professor put on that screen completely made me understand what nano engineering was. And I wouldn't have known that from an AI summary. So it's kind of like, well, let's why don't we try embracing it? Or how about everybody, I try embracing it and I'll let you know how it goes, which is what the evangelists do, right? We'll make a deal. Let me try it in my classroom. I'll give you my best practices next year and you guys can try it. But now that we have this, what do we need to add on top of it to make sure that it's accurate and it's the points I wanted to make, and the students are getting out of it what they need to get out of it?
Okay, so education evangelist / diplomat / guinea pig, I guess, Bryson, huh?
A little bit, and one of the things I want to touch base too is I have a 3-year-old daughter. And when she was 2, she would go up, completely knows how to use touchscreen, opens apps, she loves to draw, and that's been pretty consistent in my experience working, with students and teachers, is that these students grew up with this technology, they get it very easy, very quickly, and using them as a resource is beneficial to them. Give them the opportunity to teach you, to kind of expose you to some of the new technology because they have a lot of time. If they're bringing it into the classroom, they're spending a lot of time on it. They care about it. Great. How about giving the project to the student and be like, hey, how can this be used in the classroom? Now, I'm not a teacher, but I have worked with teachers that have, given that responsibility to their students, and they've told me it's been successful. So, and just seeing my daughter, and when I bring some of the technology into schools, how quickly they gravitate it, how engaged they are, how much more willing and focused to do something when they kind of have the freedom to explore something, they're interested in.
Sure.
And I think what's funny too is that like what you think they're going to get out of it isn't what they ended up getting out of it. So, what you think, yeah, it's, I'm sure you see that too, Bryson, where you're like, you're going to learn your ABCs. And instead it's more like, oh, I found out who Louis is, the, elephant who's teaching me the ABCs. Oh, there was ABCs in there. Yeah.
But there's yet even another group, then again, post-pandemic that I think has changed the dynamics for an EdTech evangelist when it comes to the proof of these tools and techniques in schools. It's parents. When we went forced remote, all of a sudden parents became technical assistants, right? You had that remote set up. All of a sudden, parents were a lot more engaged in the work of the faculty and maybe have a new appreciation for the type of work that is being done. As we go back to the new normal, do you see that gained agency of parents is a plus positive for their work?
You go to Bryson on that one.
That's pretty new. And to be honest, I've had some feedback on it, and that's been the feedback, is that it's new. There's still a lot of growing pains, but there's also, again, we're on the path of it looking good. It's going to be something that's they're going to figure out, and it's going to bring a lot of power, bringing that insight into this and to the parents and getting them on board. If you need to kind of raise that student and communicate, hey, what are we doing in class? As a parent and having to manage the calendars and these teacher, conferences, sometimes there's a lot, and I just would like to open up an app and get what's most important to me in that communication. I just want it to be easy, and if it's easy, I'm more likely to be involved.
Yeah, does that resonate, Kate?
Yeah, I think there's you wrestle with the fear that you had talked about earlier, right? So I think the parents wrestle with the same thing, where what's going on in the classroom, it's the fear of too much technology, how much is too much as far as technology goes, but also understanding that's the life, that's their way of life now, right? And I think the hardest part for parents is just not knowing how to help. So thank goodness for YouTube for at least most of the homework, right? When my daughter was having to do her math, her dad's my husband's an engineer, so he was able to help her. But in some of those math problems that are completely look different now than when he was in school, he literally went to YouTube to figure out what the teacher was saying, so that he would understand how to be able to communicate that to her at 10 p.m. when she was crying because things weren't going the way everyone needed them to go. So, and I know every parent probably deals with that math problem at 10 p.m. The night before it's due. So I think it is the fear of the unknown. So the more we can communicate with parents, the more time, the more PTAs can have parent education nights. Even, just 10 years ago, we were teaching parents how to use Google Workspace. Here's how to use a Google Doc. This is, how to use this is what they're doing. This is how to use a slideshow, how to check your email and things like that. And as I think it's really important that as technology keeps moving forward, that the parent education nights, so they understand what's happening and there's not that fear of their unknown, and that they're understanding how best to help their kids move through any roadblocks that might happen is what's best for when it comes to parents and the situations.
One aspect I think that is another challenge when it comes to being that provocative, cutting edge educator evangelist who's trying to embrace all these new technologies is that of assessment and the other kind of strictures of public education, where it's all, this is all great, but what are your STAR test results, right? I mean, how do you go? And I think, Kate, you had mentioned it earlier too, that maybe there is, now we're back in this kind of new normal and there's a little bit of a relaxation, but I don't think there's ever a relaxation when it comes to having to prove those scores are going up, or those scores have at least crossed a certain barrier. What are the ways in which those sort of assessments can be documented when you are the guinea pig, when you are the one who's closed their door and are in and doing the hard work and then the new work, and you open the door and the administrator's like, well, that's great, but what's our percentage of literacy when it comes to math and reading?
Or are students being, are my students, after I've closed the door, being tested on something that I've told them they don't have to be tested on, because they can go to a Google or whatever and find the answers, right? The testing is an interesting beast, especially with the SATs and ACTs since COVID. Moving away from that, but then now some schools are moving toward that again, because it's impossible to assess really even in the same school. You've got two, in my own school, we had two senior teachers, and if the student could be the same student in both classes and get an A in one class and a B in the other. It's just the way the teacher is grading the content. So maybe that actually, maybe AI and that grading and that kind of thing actually levels the playing field a little bit, where the AI will grade it, and now the teachers can really focus with their rubrics on the content and not the grammar. But I think with testing in general, it's got to change, because the world is going to change. I see, in what I love about the interactive display boards and anything that's kinesthetic that's coming into the classroom is that it lends itself to the collaboration. I don't see a lot of individual working anymore, in the future. As far as work goes, it's going to be teams working. It's going to be teams collaborating. It's going to be teams working. And the more that the students are learning how to work in groups and fairly, right, and not have one student doing all the work, that's the future. And how do you test that? And how do you test that not only in just one department in one school, but in a whole district, or from district to district, or from state to state? And it's hard, because that's, I think, why ACTs and SATs are coming back, is because you can't, one school district may be giving completely different grades than another school district, and how does that university know what's fair and what's not when they're looking at grades? And those standardized tests really are the only ways, I think, sometimes to measure that. But those questions and that format and those standardized tests, I think they just need to be updated to reflect what's actually happening in the classroom. And that's going to be a lot more collaboration in the future.
Yeah. Bryson, any thoughts on when it comes to assessment?
Yeah, and actually, I'd like to take the other side on this one, on where AI could be a huge benefit. If you have a lot of different students at different reading levels, at different places, where maybe you have English language learners or students with disabilities, being able to provide a test that meets them at their level, where you're not testing them on their ability to speak English, or you have that AI translate it for you and give it into a platform where they can really understand with it and prove that they know the content, or maybe it's something we need to revisit on. So being able to reach those harder students, we can automate that with AI.
Yeah, that throws in yet another one of the great education phrases of personalized learning, right, Kate?
Oh, yeah. How do you do that, right? You have 40 kids in this classroom now, and that really is, I think Bryson hit it on the nose. Like, that is where AI is going to be able to come in and really help teachers. Teachers aren't going to be up until midnight. They know personalization or individualized lesson plans are best for our students. We've Gardner's multiple intelligences has been knocking us in the head forever. So, we know we're supposed to do that, but how do we do that with 40 kids in the classroom and grading? So again, AI is just hopefully going to be able to just take a lot of things off the plates where teachers can like be able to use AI to create these lesson plans, but and then choreograph, be a composer for the classroom, compose what's disseminated rather than having to necessarily create it. I think that's going to be kind of a fun way to give. We should even give them a maestro stick or something for as it's coming out, maybe.
Well, so as we started this conversation and I talked about how our readers and our listeners are EdTech evangelists, even if they don't know they are quite yet, and that's the value of this conversation. And I hope folks are coming away inspired to kind of either just improve or just become more effective in the way in which they're influencing their schools and their districts. And we got pretty big picture when it came to AI and all the different aspects of it. But in terms of a takeaway, what sort of advice would you give to our audience here in terms of first steps of taking their evangelism to that next level? Is there something that they could do tomorrow morning as they enter either the classroom or the school that you could say would like, here's step number one in terms of taking any initiatives or ideas that they have to that next level? I'll throw that on your lap first, Kate.
So, it really is finding what works for you and making it, enhancing that and making it perfect. For me, it was 20% time in Genius Hour. And I was able to, move into that field. I got a fellowship from Q. Back in the day, I still believe hugely in Genius Hour and 20% time in the classroom. And that's kind of everything that I wanted. Everything that I wanted from my classroom really kind of centered around, I was doing this, I was blogging about it, the goods and the bads. I think it is finding what you want and just taking the risks and making what you want to do stronger and stronger and stronger. I know that that's worked for several of my colleagues, in the education field, from like hyperdocs up to 20% time with Kevin Brickhauser. Hyperdocs with Lisa Highfield, to 20% time with Kevin Brickhauser, and I think finding what worked for us and what we enjoyed and what we loved and what we were passionate about, and then just making sure we had the tools to do it, and then dreaming on top of that. Now, how can I even make this better and better and better? And that is getting, it really is getting the support of your administration. And it's really hard when there are still, administrators who wouldn't support something like that. But finding companies that are willing to support your endeavors, finding those angels that will come in and help your classroom, whether it's from something like Donors Choose to something like here at LG, where we are, really encouraging teachers to come and create, do their own professional development, and what can we do for your classroom to make this happen for you? So it's starting with the dream and figuring out how to make it even better, I think, in my world.
Yeah, and so Bryson, ideas from your neck of the woods?
Yeah, well, I think Kate said it right there. It's my advice would be, call the company you'd be interested in doing. If I got a call from someone who wanted to introduce technology into their classroom and school district, and they're like, hey, this makes a lot of sense for us, I'd like to give it a go. I don't really have any support, but this makes a lot of sense, and I will go in there and I'll be the pilot, and if it's successful, I'll take it to my principal. And if the principal likes it and you're getting good results, then maybe I know another principal at your school, or maybe I know another director of technology. Maybe I come out, I set the technology up, and Kate and I come out and we go and we make sure that it's running right. We work with your technology team to make sure everything's, to make sure you are successful in that endeavor. So you have a lot of support that you might not know you have. There are a lot of people like myself who are in EdTech because they love what they do. They love working with teachers and students, bringing value, and they will go out and they will spend time with you and make sure you have the tools to use that technology successful. And if it's, it doesn't work, if it's not great for you, fantastic. You gave it a try, and maybe down the road it might be another opportunity to collaborate. But yeah, give us a try. And that's another point too is, who are you working with? Are you working with someone that's willing to do that? And because a lot of people are, some people aren't. So give them an opportunity.
And it doesn't have to be the tech director to reach out. Then is what you're saying.
It could be a teacher. It could be a librarian. It could be, I don't know about a student because 18 and they don't manage a class, but yes, just about, reach out. We're here to help.
That's fantastic stuff. I think we've really plumbed the depths here on a lot of things that EdTech evangelists can do and benefit for their schools and districts. And I want to thank both of you for your time and your insights. I think it's been a great hour. And I'd also like to thank the audience members for joining us as well. It's been a great conversation. As a reminder, you'll be getting an email within the next few days that contains a link to this recording along with the slides. Thanks again, Kate Bryson, for participating, and everybody have a great day.
Thank you, Kevin.